It started like most HOA nightmares do, quietly, almost invisibly, the kind of problem that creeps into your life before you realize it's already wrapped its fingers around your throat. When my wife and I bought our home, we were told the neighborhood association was light touch and mostly inactive. That phrase should have been a warning. In HOA language, it usually means someone is waiting for a reason to matter again. At first, things were calm. The street was peaceful, lined with similar-looking houses, trimmed lawns, and the usual unspoken rules that everyone followed without question. No loud music, no broken-down cars, no problems. We kept to ourselves, worked long hours, and didn't attract attention. That alone was enough to put a target on our backs. The first letter arrived 6 months in. It wasn't aggressive, just passive enough to sound official while still feeling personal. A complaint about our trash cans being visible for too long after pickup day. The letter didn't say who complained, only that the HOA had received multiple reports. We adjusted. We always did. That was our mistake. Then came a second notice, this time about our driveway. Apparently, the way we parked made the street look cluttered. It didn't matter that our cars were legally parked within our own property line and identical to what half the neighborhood did daily. We complied again, even though it felt ridiculous. We told ourselves it wasn't worth the trouble. But HOA power doesn't grow because it's right. It grows because people give in. Within weeks, the letters became more frequent. Landscaping, window blinds, even the color of a decorative mat by our front door. Each notice carried the same tone, polite on the surface, threatening underneath. Fines were mentioned casually, like an afterthought, as if they were inevitable. It became clear this wasn't about rules. It was about control. The HOA board president was a woman who had lived on the street the longest and made sure everyone knew it. She acted as if time alone gave her ownership over every inch of pavement and sidewalk. She walked the neighborhood daily, clipboard in hand, eyes scanning for violations like a predator looking for weakness. She never spoke directly to us, but we felt her presence everywhere. Things escalated when we stopped responding immediately. One morning, we woke up to a bright orange warning sticker slapped on our mailbox. Unauthorized modification, according to the HOA. The modification was a small, tasteful house number plate that had been there since before we moved in. The notice included a deadline and a fine. No discussion, no appeal mentioned. That was the moment something shifted. We started documenting everything. Photos, dates, letters. We read the HOA bylaws line by line. What we found didn't match their claims. Many of the violations weren't violations at all. Some rules they were enforcing had been removed years ago. Others were never approved legally. The HOA was operating on habit, not authority. When we pushed back politely, the tone changed. Emails turned cold. Letters became formal and aggressive. The HOA accused us of being uncooperative and disruptive to community harmony. That phrase was used repeatedly like a weapon. Suddenly, we weren't just rule breakers. We were a problem that needed to be dealt with. Then came the threat. A certified letter arrived stating that the HOA would pursue further action if we continued to ignore directives. It didn't say what that action would be, but the implication was clear. They wanted to scare us into submission. They underestimated us. What they didn't know, and what made all of this so dangerous for them, was that my wife wasn't just some random homeowner they could bully. She lived her professional life enforcing laws, understanding boundaries, and dealing with abuse of authority. She recognized exactly what was happening. Still, we never expected how far they would go. The incident happened on a quiet afternoon. No warning, no email, no letter, just a knock at the door that carried a weight behind it. The kind of knock that doesn't ask, it demands. When I looked through the window, my stomach dropped. Police cars. Not one. Multiple. Neighbors peeked through curtains. Phones came out. The HOA president stood at the edge of the sidewalk, arms crossed, watching like she was finally getting the show she wanted. Whatever story she told them, it was enough to bring officers to our home. At that moment, the neighborhood froze. I opened the door slowly, heart racing. I knew we had done nothing wrong, but the presence of law enforcement always carries uncertainty. The officers stood stiff, hands near their belts, eyes scanning everything. They treated the situation like a potential threat, not a misunderstanding. That's when my wife stepped forward. She had been inside, calm, composed, listening. And when she came into view, fully uniformed, unmistakably official, everything changed in an instant. The energy shifted. The officer's posture changed. Confusion replaced authority. Recognition replaced suspicion. The HOA president's confidence evaporated. Whatever narrative had been fed to the police didn't survive the sight of someone who clearly knew the law better than anyone involved. The silence was heavy, the kind that makes people realize they may have crossed a line they can't uncross. The street that day wasn't just quiet. It was waiting. The shift was immediate, even if no one said a word. Authority doesn't always announce itself loudly. Sometimes it moves silently, like gravity, pulling everyone into a new position before they realize what's happening. That's exactly what happened the moment my wife stood in full uniform at our front door. The officers who had arrived expecting a routine HOA complaint suddenly found themselves reassessing everything. Their rigid stance softened, not out of fear, but recognition. This was no longer a simple call about a non-compliant homeowner. This was a situation involving someone who understood procedure, jurisdiction, and accountability better than the people who had summoned them. The HOA president, standing confidently just minutes earlier, looked smaller now. Her arms loosened. Her posture shifted. The smug certainty she had worn like armor began to crack. She had expected validation. She had expected enforcement. What she hadn't expected was exposure. From the sidewalk, neighbors watched silently. This wasn't just entertainment anymore. This was a public unraveling. The same people who had quietly accepted HOA letters and fines for years were now seeing the association challenged in real time and losing control of the narrative. The officers began reviewing the situation carefully. Whatever story they had been given didn't align with the reality in front of them. No immediate threat, no disturbance, no violation visible from the street. Just a normal home, a calm household, and an HOA representative who suddenly had a lot less power than she thought. My wife didn't need to raise her voice or assert dominance. She didn't need to explain herself in detail. Her presence alone forced a reset. Procedures mattered now. Evidence mattered. Jurisdiction mattered. And that was the HOA's weakest ground. The questions turned inward. Why were police called instead of civil channels? Why was this matter escalated without documentation? Why was an HOA attempting to enforce rules that didn't involve immediate danger? Those questions didn't need to be spoken out loud to cause damage. They were written all over the officers' faces. The HOA president tried to regain control by gesturing toward the house, toward the driveway, toward imaginary violations that only existed in her mind. But gestures don't hold up under scrutiny. Policies do. Laws do. And she had neither on her side. One of the officers requested documentation. Not from us, from her. That was the breaking point. She didn't have it. Not the kind that mattered. No legal notice authorizing police involvement. No court order. No proof of emergency. Just complaints, assumptions, and a belief that her title gave her authority beyond its limits. The officers stepped aside to reassess. Their attention was no longer on us. It was on the HOA's misuse of public resources. That shift was devastating for her. The neighborhood felt the change instantly. People leaned closer to their windows. A few stepped outside, pretending to check mail or water plants, but really watching history happen on their street. This wasn't just about one house anymore. This was about every fine, every warning, every intimidation tactic that had been quietly accepted for years. The officers returned with a noticeably different tone. Calm, controlled, professional. They clarified boundaries, not aggressively, but firmly. This was not a criminal matter. This was not a police issue. This was a civil dispute, and it never should have reached this point. The HOA president stood there, absorbing the reality that she had gone too far. Calling the police wasn't a power move. It was a mistake. And mistakes like that leave a paper trail. Before leaving, the officers documented the incident. Names, times, reasons for the call, who initiated it, why. That documentation mattered more than anything else that day, because it meant accountability had entered the story. And once that happens, things rarely stop at a single incident. The patrol cars pulled away slowly, not with urgency, but with finality. The show was over. The crowd dispersed. The street returned to its normal quiet state. But something fundamental had changed. The HOA president didn't linger long. She left without speaking, without looking back, without the confidence she had arrived with. Her authority on that street had been built on perception, and perception had just been shattered in front of everyone. Inside our home, the adrenaline settled into clarity. We knew this wasn't the end. People who abuse power don't stop when they're embarrassed. They regroup. They justify. They escalate, quietly this time. And sure enough, within days, the HOA began damage control. Emails were sent to residents explaining the misunderstanding. Language softened. Fines were paused. Enforcement was suddenly under review. The same board that had acted like a private government now spoke like a cautious committee afraid of scrutiny. But fear doesn't erase consequences. Behind the scenes, records were being requested. Complaints were being reviewed. Long-ignored questions about HOA authority were resurfacing. Homeowners who had been silent for years started talking to each other, comparing notes, sharing experiences, connecting dots. The street wasn't owned by the HOA anymore. It was waking up, and the HOA knew it. Power doesn't disappear overnight. It erodes, slowly at first, then all at once. That's what happened to our HOA after the day they decided to use the police as a scare tactic. The call itself faded from public view quickly, but the consequences spread quietly through the neighborhood like a crack in a foundation that no one could ignore anymore. The first visible change was silence. The daily emails stopped. The warning letters disappeared. The president's morning patrols with her clipboard ended abruptly. For years, her presence had been a constant reminder of control. Now, her absence was louder than anything she'd ever said. People noticed, and once they noticed, they started asking why. Homeowners began requesting records. Not aggressively, not emotionally, just formally. Financial statements, violation histories, meeting minutes, voting records. The things most HOAs rely on people never bothering to ask for. What those documents revealed confirmed what many had suspected for years: selective enforcement, outdated rules, improper fines, and decisions made without proper votes or legal backing. The HOA had survived on intimidation and apathy. It couldn't survive transparency. As more residents compare their stories, a pattern emerged. The same houses were targeted repeatedly. The same families were labeled problematic. The same rules were enforced inconsistently, depending on who the board felt like disciplining that month. This wasn't governance. It was favoritism disguised as order. The board tried to respond by scheduling an emergency meeting. For the first time in years, attendance overflowed. Chairs ran out. People stood along the walls. Neighbors who had never spoken to each other before sat side by side, united by a shared realization. They had been managed, not represented. The HOA president attempted to control the meeting, but control requires consent, and that consent was gone. Questions came fast, about the police call, about the missing approvals, about the fines that had never been legally justified, about where the money had gone. Each question chipped away at her authority, and with every answer she avoided, the room grew more restless. No shouting was necessary. No confrontation. The facts did all the damage on their own. Within weeks, resignations followed. First quietly, then publicly. Board members stepped down citing personal reasons and stress. The president held on the longest, but even she couldn't withstand the pressure of formal complaints, legal inquiries, and a neighborhood that no longer feared her. When she finally resigned, there was no announcement. No forward, just a name quietly removed from the website. The HOA tried to continue without her. It failed. Without her aggressive enforcement, the association had nothing left but paperwork and a damaged reputation. Residents voted down budget increases. Contracts were reviewed and canceled. Fines were refunded. Policies were rewritten or scrapped entirely. The illusion of power was gone, and without it, the HOA was just another organization bound by the same laws as everyone else. Eventually, a vote was held, not to reform, to dissolve. The majority was overwhelming. People were done. They had seen what happened when authority went unchecked, when power was confused with ownership, and when fear was used as a tool. They chose freedom instead. The HOA that once claimed to control the street ceased to exist. The signs came down. The letters stopped permanently. The neighborhood returned to what it should have always been, a community, not a controlled zone. People waved again. Conversations happened on sidewalks. For the first time since we moved in, the street felt genuinely peaceful. As for us, life went back to normal. No more warnings. No more threats. No more false authority knocking on our door. The incident became a story neighbors told new homeowners as a cautionary tale, not about us, but about what happens when someone mistakes power for entitlement. The police call that was meant to scare us ended up exposing everything the HOA tried to hide. They didn't just lose that day. They lost their grip. They lost their credibility. They lost their control. And in the end, they lost themselves.